Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door NetAdmin. Today I'm going to take a shorter look at something that regularly mixes up network admins and system admins that I have worked with. So let's jump into this straight away. DNS. The end of the video from last week, I mentioned that the design spec for this is that you're kind of supposed to have multiple domain controllers available to serve as DNS. That's how you do reliability. But what I have seen a lot of people try to do is say, okay, well, fine, I'll make the domain controller the primary DNS, and I'll put something else like Google DNS in for the secondary DNS so that if the domain controller goes offline or is unavailable for any reason, then the client can use Google DNS and everything will be good. This is an excellent way to break your domain, and I'll tell you why. But let's start with, how is this supposed to be set up? Well, like I said, it's supposed to be set up with multiple domain controllers to establish reliability. And your domain is supposed to be set up as an external, publicly addressable domain. And there's a few reasons for that. It enables things like using SSL certificates that are actually publicly trustable, because you can't get a certificate for a .internal domain or a .int or anything else like that. It's supposed to be externally addressable. And all the computers will use their local DNS, the domain controller, to find internal services, Active Directory, Kerberos, LDAP, all that fun stuff. So there's a lot of internal records that need to be visible. It also means that you're going to have split view or split horizon or split brain DNS, however you want to refer to it. There's all of these things baked into this design assumption. And another one of the design assumptions is, if you've got all internal domain services, then the reliability is taken care of. So Microsoft has a feature in its client operating systems called DNS multihoming. This is something I read about in an archived article on TechNet back from the Windows XP-ish days, and I don't know if it's still online, but it's still a feature. It's something that's baked into Windows, and it can't be disabled. There's no setting to turn this off. So it's important for us as admins to understand that it's there and how it works. DNS multihoming, just let's describe the problem that it's trying to fix first. Let's say you've got a DNS server and it goes offline. Okay. You have a secondary DNS server, all right. Let's use that. But if the primary is offline, do we want to keep trying the primary on every single query and waiting however long, 30 seconds, for the query to time out before we fall through to the secondary DNS? Or do we just want to mark that down and use the secondary DNS for a while, give the primary some time to come back up? You probably, for efficiency's sake, want to just use the secondary and go, okay, the primary's down. I'm not going to try it for every single query. I'll give it some time, and then we'll try it again and see if it's back online. Okay. Now let's take this a step further. How about if your primary DNS is online, but it's slow? The server's overloaded, it's paused its disks to take a snapshot for backup purposes, whatever. But it's slow. It's noticeably slow now. Maybe you want to check your secondary DNS and see if it's faster. If your secondary DNS is faster, again, do you want to send every query to the slow server first, or do you just want to start using your faster one? Okay. Is there a threshold beyond which you want to say this is too slow? Or do you just want to use whichever one is faster? And that's where we get to DNS multihoming. DNS multihoming doesn't wait to see if it's down or if it's past a certain threshold of slowness. DNS multihoming means that the Windows DNS client proactively starts resolving queries using the secondary or tertiary or quaternary. I mispronounced that, I'm sure. But it'll proactively resolve using other DNS servers to see if one of them might be faster. And it will typically do this for a block of time, averaging it over 15 minutes or so. Which means that you're not guaranteed that your DNS client on the workstation side is always going to go to the primary DNS of the domain controller. It just won't. Sometimes it will go to the secondary DNS. And if you happened to go to Google DNS and resolve a query and it resolved in 8 milliseconds, and your server happened to be taking a backup and it was like 100 milliseconds response time, your client is going to say, okay, so Google's faster. I'm just going to keep using Google for a while, and we'll go back to the primary domain controller at some point. That means that all of your DNS lookups will be going through Google for a period of time. So any requests for internal services like a logon server for domain controllers or a file server for file shares, all of that's going to be resolved through Google instead, which if you're using a .internal domain name, definitely doesn't have records for that. And even if you're using split view DNS, Google will have the external addresses, and your client may or may not be able to actually use those to get connectivity. From the client side, it's like the domain's just gone away. I have no idea where to find it anymore. That will lead to problems, but they'll be very, very difficult for you to find out because it's built into the DNS client service in Windows. And when you actually go to test things by using standard tools like NSLookup doesn't use that. NSLookup just uses the servers as configured. What's my primary server? Let's do that. If you're going to put in a secondary server, then I'll query that. NSLookup will always use the primary DNS server first, whereas the DNS client in Windows will not. So you'll get sporadic issues with contacting the domain or finding services that just don't make a lot of sense. Sometimes it'll be group policy can't be downloaded or resolved, or settings won't propagate from the domain, and you'll be left scratching your head going, I don't get it. Every time I look at this with NSLookup on the workstation to see what's happening, it's using the domain controller and everything's working fine. I don't get it. If you've configured external DNS that isn't your domain controller for redundancy, or even if you have multiple domain controllers and somebody puts one public server into the list of DNS assigned by DHCP and goes, well, that's just in case everything else goes down. If you've done that, you're going to have issues in your domain. There's no way to stop that. It's because it's going against the design principles that Microsoft has baked into Windows from the very beginning. So it's something you need to be aware of, for sure. And yeah, I'm just thinking if there's anything else I wanted to share on this. But no, it's one that's mixed up a lot of people over the years. And so just remember, keep your DNS servers internal only. And incidentally, this takes effect on the servers too. because servers, even the one that's running DNS on your domain controller, servers have a DNS server and a DNS client. When you're putting DNS on the network interface, that is for DNS client. I've seen netadmins put external DNS servers on the network card of the server. Well, the server needs to be able to reach everything externally. Yes, it does, but that's not how you do it. Because now the server, for all of its client internal access, when it tries to look up its domain, it can't find it. It's going to be using incorrect information from outside the network. What you need to do on your server's network card is point it internally at 127.0.0.1 to the DNS server that's running locally. And then your DNS server will have forwarders set up to reference stuff from outside. That's how you do it correctly. And again, if you try to put external DNS and mix and match it and say, hey, I'll do, primary DNS of 127.0.0.1 and secondary DNS of 8.8.8.8, it's not primary and secondary. DNS multihoming means that it will use them at random, attempting to find whichever one has better performance and proactively improve the user experience. So if you go against the design principles that Microsoft has baked into the Windows networking model, you're going to have issues and it will screw you up. So that's a warning. That's a word on DNS multihoming. And that's all I've got for you today. If you have thoughts on other things that you'd like me to talk about or things that you'd like to see me demonstrate, feel free to let me know right down there in the comments section. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I am your next door netadmin, and we will see you next time.